All right, guys, welcome back to the Pocket Mads channel. It's Maddie here. Today, we're going to be breaking down the best meta decks that you should be playing right now in Pokemon Pocket. Mega Shine released just a little over a week ago. The meta is so crazy. Things are changing so rapidly. This Friday is going to be a really interesting video because I don't think people necessarily... I feel like things have changed so quickly. People don't maybe understand where things are at right now. And this week particularly... coming off of PMPT number 25 this past weekend, and then of course this entire week of meta development, things are just absolutely completely different, and I want to try to capture that, and I want to try to illustrate that in today's video. So this will definitely be an interesting one. I have a lot to talk about, but before we get into the deck lists, you have to go register for PMPT number 26. That's this upcoming weekend's tournament, Saturday, April 4th at noontime. This is a little cutoff here on the screen, but it's going to be a great tournament. We're going to be live streaming it all weekend. I do know that it is Easter this weekend. It's also my birthday, so I won't be that available, but the tournament goes on, and I would still recommend that you guys play. We have, of course, the judges, the moderators, the casters. They're all going to be there doing what they do, making this happen, so definitely come out and compete. I do think that whatever happens from a result standpoint this weekend will likely be the defining factor of this season, right? So I think that developments this week have really solidified a lot of things, but it's going to come down to what happens this weekend and where we go from there. So going into this weekend for PMPT 26, as well as all of the other tournaments, you're going to want to play the best decks. Let's just dive right into it in today's video. Don't forget, like and subscribe. We are so close to 50,000 subscribers. Can we do it? Also, if you haven't checked it out already, check out the Champion Mads channel, link down in the description below. The first deck today that we're going to talk about is Bad Dreams Darkrai Dark deck. Now, I think that this is potentially like the final form for these dark type decks. I think that the Bad Dreams archetype, although you can play it in any type of deck because Igglybuff doesn't take any energies, and Bad Dreams Darkrai, of course, it doesn't need energy. So the whole combo there, you know, it doesn't matter what energy type you're playing in the deck. But I do think the strategy itself kind of lends itself very well to the dark type archetype in general. I think that, of course, Darkrai EX fits very well with Bad Dreams. Not only are you taking off that damage every turn when your opponent is asleep, but you're also able to attach those energies to Darkrai EX and then deal an additional 20 damage. And I think it's just an incredibly strong strategy. Basically, a deck like this into anything in the game right now that isn't specifically playing counter meta sleep, like Teal Mask Ogerpon or Comfey, or even like PCLs, things like that. Lumberry, as somebody commented. I made a whole speech about how we need a tool card, and then people were like, you forgot Lumberry, and I did. The issue with Lumberry is that it discards after its effect gets used, so it's really not a useful card. Yeah, I think that there's definitely a lot of counterplay to the Bad Dream stuff. The Altaria Bad Dreams deck, and in fact, I don't even think we have a single Altaria deck in today's video. I could be wrong about that. But the Altaria version of Bad Dreams, which was at the beginning of the season the most popular version, definitely kind of fell off a little bit. We're seeing a ton of counter meta play for Bad Dreams because I do think it is going to be a meta staple moving forward. It's one of those things that is just so strong. The potential to deal 50 damage on your first turn for no energies is effectively the most broken thing in the game. So luckily, we do have some ways to counterplay it, but I think at this point, and even moving forward, I do think this entire Bad Dreams archetype, combo is going to be a meta staple for some time to come. I don't really know that something this strong will ever really fade away into irrelevance. Now, that being said, this is the deck I would play if you're going to be playing the Igglybuff Darkrai combo. Darkrai EX, Mega Absol EX. Again, lots of basic Pokemon, a very consistent deck list. We're sneaking in the Leaf in here, as well as double X speed, which is always an interesting thing to note. But it's really not that big of a deal. I think that, yes, you don't really want to lead with either Darkrai or Absol in most scenarios. You really want Igglybuff in the active in the early game. This deck is consistent enough to where, yes, you could play double Leaf because, of course, all of your Darkrai have retreat cost of 2, but you can also just attach and then retreat. Also, we're going to have to draw cards. So most of the time you're going to be playing Research Copycat on your turn. So playing double Leaf is a little counterproductive. I think that double X speed, or at least one X speed, one Leaf is probably the way to go. But that aside, that's the only thing about this deck that I don't necessarily love is, sometimes you don't lead off with the right Pokemon. if you do lead off Igglybuff, it's just going to be a really strong strategy. Starting Plains is going to buff all of your Pokemon's HP, which again is very strong. You know, similar to another deck that we're going to see in this video, basic type Pokemon are making a comeback. And I think that's really because of so many buffs that the basic Pokemon have gotten and how strong a lot of these basics are. That being said, guys, Bad Dreams, incredibly strong. This is the way that I'm kind of playing it right now. Again, we did see the Greninja stuff, so you can play a deck exactly like this, but with Greninja thrown in, I just don't really think you need it. I think Greninja has found its place in various different decks this season, but I don't think it's necessarily as needed in Bad Dreams. This archetype becoming very popular, and I think it's going to be one of the more successful decks this weekend. Well, again, what's also crazy this season is how many strong different decks there are. It really is like, it's kind of crazy. I don't even know if we ranked this because, again, when we did our tier list early this week, it was really mostly these decks, but with Greninja thrown in. Now people just aren't really playing Greninja in this deck, and it's just becoming a little bit more consistent and very strong. So Darkrai continues to be relevant and likely will be moving forward. But you know, as far as the Bad Dreams core goes, I think Dark type is the right type for it, and I think this is still, you know, a top tier deck in the metagame. Next up, I want to talk about Charizard. Charizard's developments have been very interesting. You know, the double Charizard deck that was seeing a lot of play early this season has faded off tremendously, and I think that's mostly because of how much Oricorio saw play. That Charizard deck just did not have anything to consistently deal with Oricorio, and now, especially since Oricorio has found its way into the Manectric deck, which has solidified itself as a top-tier deck right now. And there's still some Magnezone or Oricorio running around. If you're playing Charizard, you have to play it in a way that can deal with that particular matchup. So I think what a lot of people have been doing, and again, just taking a look at the results and the win rates and everything throughout this week, this is kind of the way that Charizard has been finding the most success. And I find that to be interesting, but it's just how it's going here. So we're playing Mega Charizard Y, no Mega Charizard X, and of course the Inferno Onrush non-EX Charizard, so that we can just at least have something to go into. Now the prize math is a little bit tough here with Entei and this Charizard. That's always going to be the case, but when you're playing against Oricorio, you have to play something that can just win that matchup. And 150 is a big deal because, you know, it's going to KO a lot of Pokemon regardless. So this is just a strong card, and kind of fits the place that Mega Charizard X did, except this one can kind of just KO Oricorio. I don't think Mega Charizard X is a bad Pokemon. I think it's a very, very strong card. But, and I said this early in the season, is that Mega Charizard X is designed to kind of be able to deal with all of these non-Mega Pokemon that are relevant in the metagame. That 180 damage kind of solidifies the wins in so many different things, right? You can KO Darkrai, Giratina, Suicuine, Ogerpon, Indeedee, anything you might be playing that is an EX card but not a Mega. However, Mega Charizard Y is there specifically to just KO Mega Pokemon, and that itself is very valuable. This season, more than really any other season, we're seeing a massive influx of Mega Pokemon decks. Tons of Mega Manectric, 180 HP Pokemon, but a 3-prize Pokemon. You know, Mega Altaria is still seeing some play, 190 HP, right? But 3-prize Pokemon. Other Charizard decks are seeing play. There's Mega Absol still in the metagame, but, you know, one thing that I think has really contributed to Mega Charizard Y kind of tipping the scales going into the second week is actually the Steel-type decks. And I think there are actually multiple really strong Steel-type decks in the metagame, and they're both Mega Pokemon. Steelix, as one example, has been dominant. That's a spoiler. Steelix is in this video. And Scizor I almost included, but I don't think Scizor is still performing as well as we maybe wanted to. Steelix seems like it's just a little bit better at like what it wants to be, which is basically just a really tanky damage reduction deck. And Steelix has been dominant. It really has been a dominant deck. The metagame this season a bit slower, a bit more, you know, mid-game focused instead of, you know, aggressive high roll. Hydreigon does still exist, but for the most part, right, decks are kind of on turn 3. You know, turn 3 is kind of the standard. So Mega Steelix ends up being a little bit better, and it has been really successful this season. But, you know, Mega Charizard Y, into all of those Pokemon I just mentioned, all of the most popular Pokemon in the game, even Mega Venusaur starting to see a little bit of play. You know, Blaziken still sees a little bit of play. Tons of Mega Pokemon. I think the meta right now is sort of defined by these Mega Pokemon decks, and, you know, it just becomes more worth it, quite frankly, to play Mega Charizard Y and just be able to one-hit KO this Pokemon and win the game. So I think that this build makes the most sense, right? Play the non-EX Charizard so you can just sort of deal with the Oricorio decks when you hit them, and then you play Charizard to one-hit KO any Mega Pokemon, and you're probably going to end up winning games. and I think that's exactly where we're at right now. Mega Charizard X, very strong. It's just the way that the meta is progressing right now with all of these Mega Pokemon, as the focal points of these decks. You'd rather just play Mega Charizard Y. So even though that other dual Charizard deck has really fallen off in play, Mega Charizard Y has been, doing really well over the last, 3-4 days. And I think moving forward, it's probably going to be, that core fire type Pokemon. And I think we saw a little bit of that actually last season. Like I've been saying Mega Charizard Y is such a strong card. It's got everything going for you. You have Entei, you have Ignition, Charmeleon, which is a massive deal along with Flame Patch, drawing cards, getting a bunch of energies, and pretty consistently having a Mega Charizard Y ready to just want to KO anything at the end of the game. So, basically if you're playing against this deck list, you just can't bring in your Mega Pokemon. You're going to lose, which means you have to play something that, of course, forces your opponent to KO multiple prizes. Things like Suicuine, things like Hydreigon, even the Bad Dreams type decks. Like, that's the type of stuff you kind of have to play. But this deck is playing double PCL because, we still got to counteract, the Bad Dreams stuff. Double Rocky Helmet, double PCL, non-EX Charizard, Mega Charizard Y. We kind of have answers for basically everything. I think this is kind of the, definitely it's hard to say because I don't know if Fire's really going to end up taking over. I think the season's not really about the Fire type decks, but if I had to guess, I would say this is the definitive kind of, Fire type archetype as far as, how you would define Fire type in Pokemon Pocket right now, which is, big hitting, just KO, just big damage. Doesn't do a lot, just does damage. And sometimes that's enough to win you games. So shout out to Mega Charizard Y, and this is the kind of the new version of Mega Charizard Y that I would recommend you play. Next up is Magnezone Oricorio. Seeing a lot less play these days. Bad Dreams still common. I think that, again, Oricorio is very popular. It's very prominent. It's just being played differently now. And I think some people might be happy about that. I, for one, think that Magnezone is a very valuable Pokemon in the metagame because, it's a single prize archetype. And inherently, when you're playing Oricorio and you're playing basically only single prize archetypes, like that's a big deal. That's going to be, enough to have a really, unique position in the metagame, right? But that being said, Oricorio is seeing play in the Manectric deck, which, spoiler, is also in this video. And I think that Mega Manectric is the guy. I think that as far as all of the new stuff that came out in Mega Shine, Charizard's strong, Scizor is strong, but it really is like the Bad Dream stuff, and it's Manectric. And I find that to be really funny. It's always surprising to see which Pokemon really kind of find their way into the metagame. Magnezone Oricorio, not seeing nearly as much play as it used to. Now we are teching in the Ogerpon instead of the Pokemon Center lady, and that just ends up being a kind of a more useful card into some of those Bad Dreams decks. This, by the way, hard counters that dark Bad Dreams deck. Like, there's nothing you can do here because the Oricorios are immune to sleep, and then all of your other Pokemon can't touch Oricorio other than like the Darkrai pings. So I guess that's one, maybe you have a chance. But I think Oricorio is still incredibly useful in the current metagame, but people are playing it differently. It's just sort of seeing play with Manectric, and while I do think Magnezone Oricorio is still probably one of the best decks in the entire game, in fact, I would not be surprised if Lightning ended up winning again this weekend, just because Oricorio is so powerful. Like, there's this like dichotomy in Pokemon Pocket where it's like you want to build a really strong deck, and you don't want to just automatically lose to Oricorio, so you have to kind of find a middle ground, and that middle ground is a lot harder to achieve effectively than you might think. And we kind of seen that with that Charizard deck, with Bad Dreams. This deck here kind of has answers to everything. It's immune to a lot of different things between Teal Mask, Ogerpon, Oricorio, and the fact that, Mirror Shot Magnezone can just kind of win you games outright just by your opponent not being able to flip heads. So definitely a really, really strong deck. Hasn't seen a lot of play the last few days. Again, just many people playing Manectric, but that doesn't mean that Magnezone isn't still good. I still think that as far as like a real actual Oricorio-based deck goes, this is still the best option, and I think it will be moving forward. But that also might be because of Hydreigon still being very popular. It's definitely like a top 3 most played deck right now. And I think against Hydreigon, against Suicuine, Manectric seems to be holding its own quite well. So I think maybe Magnezone Oricorio kind of takes a backseat, but its win rates are going to be really high. It is. This is going to be a good deck regardless, even if it's not that popular. But anyway, Magnezone Oricorio, and this is the list. This is the list that people have settled on. It's Ogerpon. It's that's where we're at. That's how it goes. Next up is going to be Giratina Darkrai. Yeah, one of the things that was not on my bingo list, and it's funny because like 3 days into the season when I made a video, somebody commented, they're like, any news on Giratina Darkrai? Like, is it good this season? Is it worth playing? As it turns out, yeah, it's one of the best decks in the game right now. And again, this has always been a good deck. Oh, it has been. Like, once Indeedee came back, once we got starting planes, Peculiar Plaza, Lucky Ice Pop, you know, Giratina Darkrai was slowly in the back, you know, hiding in the shadows, just getting better and better, getting stronger, getting buffed. And then inevitably, you know, it did well at a couple tournaments. People started to pick it up, and now I think it's a real meta staple, which is crazy. We're going to have like 3 decks in this video that we didn't even put on the tier list. But these are the decks that are seeing play, and these are the decks that are successful right now as we record. That's how quickly things are developing. That's why this channel exists. So yeah, Giratina Darkrai is legitimate. And I think that for a lot of the same reasons that, you know, like these sort of, I don't know, it's a weird one, right? I think, how do I even feel about this deck? It's just, what can't this deck do? You know, I don't know. It's really crazy to me that we've almost come full circle, right? Like, we're a year from when Giratina was released in Shining Revelry, and now like Giratina Darkrai's back, and it's winning a lot. It's got a great win rate. I think, again, like, ever since this deck was a thing, it's been getting stronger for every trainer card that gets released that fits into the deck list, and I think it's got just basically everything going for it. And I really like it. You know, I think this deck's probably going to hard lose to certain things, but other things, not really. You know, Darkrai's ability still procs, you know, into the bad dreams. So, like, if you do get put asleep, you know, you have Rocky Helmets, they're going to take 20. Then you just attach to Darkrai, and then the Igglybuff's KO'd. So it's like, we're still able to do everything we want to do with this deck, even if we're asleep. Like, that's what's hilarious about this deck. You know, into Oricorio, it's never really been an issue with Darkrai, with Rocky Helmet, with all of the healing, with the ton of HP that we have. So we can get around Oricorio pretty easily right now. The sleep stuff's not really an issue. You know, Mega Charizard Y we can deal with, again, also pretty easily, because Entei can't KO us, and then our, you know, Charizard has to attack twice, so we're able to kind of KO Mega Charizard Y. We have enough HP to live hits from basically any other Mega Pokemon in the game. We're 2 at KOing anything. It just ends up being a really, really good deck. So uniquely, however the metagame has positioned itself, you know, going into the second week of Mega Shine, Giratina Darkrai is legit. It is the truth, and you need to prepare for this deck list or play it, because I really think it's a strong choice right now. I have nothing else to really say about it other than that. Kind of a shock, kind of a surprise to me, but the data doesn't lie. You know, we use the data, we use the results, we use the win rates, the statistics, the matchup data. I crunch all of those numbers before these videos. You don't see all that because people don't care to kind of see the process, but that's how I come up with which decks are worth playing. And it's interesting to see, like, you know, how quickly things change and which decks end up being really good. And Giratina Darkrai is really good right now. It's really good. Next up is Steelix. So this is the Steel type, I guess, example right now. So, you know, there's still a lot of Scizor seeing play, but Mega Steelix is seeing potentially even more play, and it has a higher win rate. And I think that's just because it has more of an identity, I think, than Steelix, or than Scizor. I think Charizard's still going to want to KO either, so it doesn't really matter. But into all of the other stuff, right? Into Oricorio, we have Onix very easy. Like, we're not worried about Oricorio at all when we're playing Mega Steelix. We don't really care about a lot of things, in fact. Like, Suicune's not that fast of a deck, right? And like, we could play, you know, Protected Poncho, but, you know, we're kind of just going to let the Indeedees go down, because the issue with this deck is if you are playing Qianpao and your strategy is to just KO Indeedee, then you're not KOing Mega Steelix. And, like, trust me, like, you're going to have to go through the Steelix if you want to win this deck, because to attack back-to-back into Indeedees plus starting planes is going to bring Indeedee above 130 HP anyway. That's just too much time. It's too much investment to try to win by KOing the Indeedees. You're just going to lose to the Steelix, because it is hitting you for 120 every turn. Hydreigon, you know, other fast-paced decks can be an issue, but all of the lightning type decks, you know, Manectric seeing a ton of play. Mega Manectric does not want to have to go through Mega Steelix. You're dealing, I think, literally 0 damage, unless somehow you can take some prize cards, because all of the damage reduction and the Indeedee healing, that 80 damage attack is completely useless. So this is a deck that can kind of just wall the Manectric deck. You know, Suicune's interesting, but again, that matchup's actually fairly easy. Charizard is kind of the main issue with Steelix, but against basically everything else, we're kind of just winning. Like, that's what's kind of weird here. We can get kind of scammed by bad dreams, but again, look at the double PCLs. You know, how many of these decks are going to have double Pokemon Center Lady in the deck? And that's the meta that we're at right now. Such a weird progression. It really is a strange time to be playing Pokemon Pocket, that the best decks in the game right now are Giratina Darkrai, Mega Steelix, you know, Mega Charizard. Like, things are just different. Like, Altaria's not doing much. You know, where's Altaria? Who knows? You know, Hydreigon's still common, but it's not that crazy. Suicune's still common, not that crazy. So it really is sort of this new era of decks, and I think Mega Steelix has made the jump. It is one of the most legitimate decks in a rather, more middle game paced metagame. If it was all high roll, then it would be kind of tough. But Mega Steelix, you can kind of relax for 2 or 3 turns. It doesn't really, you're not going to lose most of the time. And that's hilarious, So this is a real threat. And again, I think the identity of Mega Steelix is just a little bit more solidified than Mega Scizor. There is a world where Mega Scizor is better because that 150, 160 damage can be really relevant. But we'd rather just never get KO'd, right? Like, that's sort of a big deal. So shout out to Mega Steelix, one of the best decks in all of Pokemon Pocket right now. And I don't know if I were to tell you this, a month or 2 ago, I don't think anyone would have believed me, but it's the truth. And next up is Suicuine and Baxcalibur with Chien-Pao. Still a really good deck. There's not anything I can really say here. We've thrown in the Pokemon Center Ladies, so really any card that would heal you has been replaced by Pokemon Center Lady. If you were playing Lily or Erica or Irida, like, you're just playing Pokemon Center Lady now because you're just going to take a little bit less healing, but that's a fair trade-off for getting rid of the sleep, which is a massive deal still in the metagame. So yeah, I mean, I don't have anything else to tell you. The matchup spreads for this deck are interesting. This is, I think, the deck that is probably the most safest choice. If you're going into a tournament or if you're going into ranked battles, you just want to play something that can always win. And that's the thing about Suicuine, is that it does everything. It's got everything going for it. So, it's consistent. You can snipe the bench. You can deal a lot of damage. You can get through Oricorio with Baxcalibur. We're tanky with starting planes, giant capes. We got healing. This is like the quintessential. It's got some high roll capability as well with the Baxcalibur turn 2 rare candy combo. So this is like the do it all deck. Definitely going to continue to be, probably one of, if not the most popular deck this season. And I don't think anybody should be surprised here. I think that this is going to be a top tier deck for some time to come. Suicune's just such a good card, and they just give it so many. They give it, it's tough to release new water type Pokemon that are strong and expect people to play them not with Suicuine. That is the fundamental issue, I think, with Suicuine, is that it's so useful. You just are going to play it if you're playing water energies because it's just worth it. Yeah, that's all I have about Suicuine. You guys know this deck. We've covered it a lot. Still very good, so I have to recommend it. Next up is Manectric. I think a lot of people have kind of settled on a Manectric list. And this is, again, kind of a top 3 deck. This might be the most played deck over the last week. If not, it's up there. I think Manectric has really solidified itself as the new lightning type deck. So I think people like it, because it feels very lightning type. It feels very much, fast paced, consistent. We're kind of accelerating energies. We're attacking on turn 2. We're kind of outpacing our opponent, and we hit Suicuine for weakness, which is always a really big deal. There are going to be hard wins with this deck that you just can always win pretty easily. And then there's going to be some really, really bad matchups that you just can't really win ever. But that doesn't mean it's not a good deck. So Manectric been very successful, and I think it's win. Even though people have changed around the list for Manectric, I think it winning last weekend's PMPT really kind of put it in the spotlight for people to realize this is a valuable Pokemon. I think it just turns out that Zeraora is just sort of a better Pokemon to play with it. And the cool thing about Zeraora is that, you can just sort of, you deal damage early. So it kind of fits more into the fast pace of the deck. And being able to go Zera into Ori and then finish off with Mega Manectric is pretty cool. So anytime you can take prize cards without having to utilize Manectric is good, because once you bring it in, you're more, concretely kind of to a KOing, right? And Oricorio goes a long way. It does. So I think people are a little bit probably annoyed of Oricorio at this point, as they probably should be, but Oricorio is such a valuable card based around how it changes decks and how they have to build decks. So I think Oricorio is the most important card to the health of the metagame, and it always has been since it was released. So I have no issue seeing just one Oricorio in here. It's going to be really tough to ever see a lightning type deck not play at least one Oricorio. It really has to just be something spectacular. You know what I mean? So the one Oricorio is gonna find its way in there. And Zeraora, this card came out a long time ago. I've loved Zeraora from the beginning. I think it fits perfectly into the lightning type archetypes. Now we have Electric Generator. I would like to see maybe an elemental switch thrown into a deck like this, but I understand the limited pace, and these other cards probably provide even more value. No PCL in this deck, which is a little scary, right? I mean, we're playing Training Arena. We have Lucky Ice Pop. Maybe we cut that Ice Pop just for one PCL. It can go a long way. Trust me, into those sleep decks, you're going to want one Pokemon Center Lady. But, Sabrina Cyrus in here, Cape and Rocky Helmet, Training Arena. It's just got a little bit of everything for you. So incredibly consistent, very fast-paced, has some really good matchups, some really bad matchups, but probably one of the three most prominent decks in the metagame. Like, it's hard to kind of quantify it, but we're seeing a lot of Suicuine, a lot of Hydreigon, a lot of Manectric. And then, from there, we're seeing some more Steelix, we're seeing some Charizard, seeing some Bad Dreams, seeing some a little bit of Altaria, but not much Altaria at this point. A little bit of Magnezone, not much Magnezone, a little bit of Scizor. Those are the decks that really have kind of... The results this weekend are going to speak for themselves because it's going to separate which decks are seeing more play moving forward. But yeah, I think Mega Manectric is great. I'm a little bit afraid of it because depending on how the meta goes, it could be either absolutely ridiculous as like a gatekeeper, or it could be completely irrelevant, right? I mean, into certain things, Manectric just won't do the job because it doesn't deal a ton of total damage, right? So things like those Steelix damage reduction decks, it's going to be tough for sure. But we'll see. I'm glad that we have it. Next up, it's going to be Hydreigon. This is, it's still here. And again, hasn't really changed. People are throwing in the Hiking Trail, which I think is a cool card. I think Hydreigon does have some times where, just drawing the extra card, sometimes 2 cards at the end of your turn, is a massive, massive deal. Hydreigon always really relied on Copycat, but here's the thing. When you're playing Hydreigon, it can go one of 2 ways. And anybody that's played this deck knows what I mean here. And this is why we call it like a high roll deck, because this is a deck that can do literally nothing or be absolutely unbeatable early in the game, depending on the sequence of which we draw our cards. Most of our Pokemon are basics, so that's good. If you draw those Pokemon, you can, you can put them on your bench and you get them out of your hand. So that's really good. Double Poison Barb. So we can play those cards immediately, get them out of our hand. Pokeballs we're going to play, we can get them out of our hand. However, you have to play double Rare Candy, you got to play double Hydreigon, and you got to play the Ice Pops, which means that is potentially, and Sabrina Cyrus. So that's like a handful of cards in your deck that if you draw them, you might not be able to play them at all. So sometimes you're going to find games where literally your entire hand is unplayable cards and your deck doesn't do anything. So this is a deck that really depends on drawing the right cards. Excuse me. Drawing the right cards in the right sequence. And depending on how proper that sequence is going to greatly just define how strong this deck is. So Hiking Trail is basically further exacerbating those games where like we draw all of the playable cards first, and then we can just draw 2 or 3 more cards at the end of our turn and just steamroll our opponent. So Hiking Trail is actually a really smart card in this deck. And again, we're very reliant on Copycat because not only is Copycat going to give us card advantage most often, but it's also going to refresh our hand. And that's like the inherent broken part about Copycat is in decks like this, like I said, sometimes your whole hand is useless. So like just being able to get rid of it instead of drawing more cards, just get rid of the hand is a really, really big deal. So you can Copycat useless cards for playable cards and your turn with no cards and then draw more cards. So I think Hiking Trail is actually a really smart inclusion here. It's also going to remove your opponent's stadium, which is something you always have to remember. Even if like the stadium isn't like mission critical to your deck, sometimes other decks do have really critical stadium cards. So being able to play your stadium and remove your opponent's stadium is just worth it in its own right. So I love Hiking Trail. I think Hydreigon is still a top 3 deck in the game. At least this season it is. And we got to respect it. Yeah. And if Lightning's popular, I think Hydreigon will be popular. And I think that's a good thing. And that's probably why we're seeing less Magnezone. But things like Charizard also don't love Hydreigon. There's a lot of things that just don't really want to hit Hydreigon. Some things probably don't mind it, but it's definitely like still the most, like pop off early game high roll, kind of turbo type deck. Manectric's fast paced, but it's consistent. Like this is just like, hey, what's your turn 2 looking like? Do we win? Do we? We'll see. And I think it's kind of taking that spot in the metagame, honestly. All right, lastly is going to be an interesting deck, and this is the weekly wild card. This is where it gets really hard to actually convince you guys that this is what's happening. People are going to think this is like a late April Fool's joke, but like the decks that we choose in the video, we're choosing them for a reason, and I can't stress to you enough about how strange the meta is right now. The wild card for this week is actually becoming one of the more popular decks in the metagame and one of the most successful decks over the last few days. Maybe a flash in the pan, maybe it's a temporary thing, but I still have to showcase it to you guys. That's going to be Blaziken Greninja. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why. Just a deck that I guess somebody brought to a tournament, did well, and then more people brought it, and more decks did well. Blaziken has been always one of the more underrated Pokemon in the game. I think people just prefer to play things like Altaria and Hydreigon in the past over Blaziken. But the thing about Blaziken is that it's just a pretty chill Pokemon. Pretty easy to play this thing. 2 fire energies, 140 with the burn, and that's relevant. So what we're doing here is we're playing Heatmor with Tongue Whip for bench damage. We're playing Greninja with Water Shuriken for the bench damage, and then we're playing Cyrus as a win condition, right? And we have Furfrou as a leadoff option here. You know, only 1 Froakie, double Greninja. Like, this is a super funky deck, but trust me, like, play it out. Double Rare Candy, but double middle, 1 Combuskin. So we have to play a middle evolution here. But the thing is, you don't need double Blaziken. You just kind of need 1 Blaziken. So if your bench can be, like, if you can lead Heatmor, or Furfrou or Heatmor as like your leadoffs, and then by the end of the game you have Blaziken with double Greninja on your bench, like, good luck, dude. Like, that's not you're not gonna have a good time. And that's what this deck does. You know, we got the Mesagosa in here, you know, little Mesagosa coin flip action, you know, double Pokeball, double research, double copycat. Yeah, try it out. It's not something I've tested. I'm just saying that people are playing it and it's doing well. So I don't know why that is. I think maybe like the burn plus Greninja could just kind of get over Oricorio really easily. But it adds up, right? Like, Tongue Whip plus Greninja plus Blaziken is probably just going to KO most things. And it can 2-hit KO Steelix, which is a big deal. Like, even with the healing and the damage reduction, like, this is a deck that will 2-hit KO Mega Steelix, and that's probably a pretty big deal. And it's also going to be able to KO Suicunes, so, like, in the Suicune stuff, that's relevant. Such a weird deck, such a strange deck, but a very, very prominent deck currently in the metagame. We'll see if people play it this weekend. People are playing it right now today in today's tournaments. A couple of large tournaments today. A lot of Blaziken Greninja going around. Not something I expected to really see. Yesterday, I took a bit of a day off. I wasn't feeling well. Today, I come in here and I see Blaziken Greninja popping off, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. But this is the perfect. This is the wild card that we dream of, quite frankly. You know, this is a deck playing only fire energies. People are gonna ask that. Don't play water energy. Just only play fire. But people aren't gonna believe it. They're not, and it's not my job to convince you. I'm just kind of giving you the info. You know what I mean? So we'll see. Anyway, that is the video. Those are the top meta decks in the game right now. Is that what you expected? Or any of these kind of what you thought was going on? If you kind of were away from the game for a couple of days, or if you just like are tuning in from Monday, a lot has changed since Monday. It's been a weird season. Maybe it continues to get weird. This might be one of those seasons where nothing really gets solidified, which are really fun seasons to cover, but also, you know, can be a little bit tricky to play, especially when rate comes out and you don't know what you're going up against. Could definitely be interesting, but yeah, this weekend's going to be important. Definitely register and play in PMPT number 26. You know, help solidify the metagame, get the data going. We'll review it. We'll figure it all out. We'll strategize moving forward because, you know, this next week here, as we go into next week, like, that's when ranked comes out. So we want to know what's going on, right? Before ranked comes out. Also, then Champions will be out next week too. So it's going to be a crazy time regardless, but play in PMPT number 26. Super excited. Yeah, guys, that's the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. What did you guys think? Comment down below. And yeah. Peace out.